Hamas terror group says it's accepting the ceasefire proposal for a hostage deal, day 213 of the war. The dramatic development coming on Monday evening after Israel called on residents in parts of Rafah in southern Gaza to evacuate from their homes and move to a safe zone. Hamas political leader Ismail Haniyeh telling Qatar's Prime Minister Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani and Egypt's intelligence chief Abbas Kamel that the terror group accepts their terms for a ceasefire with Israel. 132 hostages remain in captivity. They range in age from a baby to elderly peace activists in their 80s. It's still not clear how many of the hostages are alive. Now, the announcement does not reveal details of the terms of the deal, and there are reports that Israeli officials say it's not the same proposal they agreed to with Egyptian mediators 10 days ago. IDF spokesman Daniel Hagari speaking out in his briefing just a short while ago.
We examine every answer and reply very seriously and find every possibility regarding the negotiations for the return of the hostages to their homes as a central task as quickly as possible. And at the same time, we continue our operations in the Gaza Strip and will continue to do so.
So for the latest, let's go live to correspondent Zach Anders. He joins us once again from southern Israel. And Zach, celebrations in the streets of Rafah in Gaza after the Hamas terror group said it was accepting that proposal. In Israel, some skepticism. Israeli officials say it's not the deal they agreed to exactly. What is the latest? What is confirmed?
Well, I think the headline banner for tonight could just simply read conflicting reports. This has been a night of one side saying one thing, the other having a disarrayed messaging publicly. So we really don't know where things stand. What I can say is what I've seen tonight as I've driven the length of the Gaza Strip from Kerem Shalom now up towards Be'eri, airstrikes throughout the area. There's been some voices online on the Israeli side that are saying that there's a lot of movement with tanks and personnel on the ground near the Kerem Shalom area. We would be better suited to tell you whether or not that was taking place, but the police have moved us away and told us that we can no longer be there, that it's a closed military area despite civilians still having access and citizens also taking pictures and performing the acts of journalists as well. But we weren't allowed to be there. It was a tremendous amount of force that was gathered around us, but nobody seemed ready to move. There was an atmosphere of still waiting for things to take place. But the air activity, I should stress how heavy some of the airstrikes in this eastern area east of Rafah between the city itself and the border fence. Tremendous amount of aerial activity, some of the most I've seen since the beginning of the war. And it was so concentrated, the fire, it was really incredible to watch, and some of the video that we were able to gather as well there, incredible as well. So as things stand right now, the military activity, the military campaign is still well underway. There's still a tremendous amount of aerial activity all throughout, from the north to the south of the Gaza Strip. We can't say for certain tonight if this is any indication that the Israeli establishment has already responded to this ceasefire deal. Nothing's changed, so we can't say that that's a response, obviously. But at this point in the night, from what we're seeing, the celebrations in Rafah, a lot of videos published on the Palestinian side, celebrations in the street, reacting as though this deal is going to become a reality. Israeli sources saying that not only they're not entirely sure what exactly Hamas has agreed to, that as of yesterday, the main sticking point, not only as we've discussed, that the umbrella point that's being made on the Israeli side is this end to the conflict, and that's what Hamas has been pushing for, and that would not be agreed to. But one of the other things that I was told yesterday would be a main sticking point is that Israel still has not received the names and the proof of life of the hostages that would be released in the first stage, and that was the major obstacle going forward that Israel was not going to agree to the deal. At least this is what some of the sources are telling us. Israel would not agree to the deal if they weren't sure and certain that at least they knew who would be provided, that there wouldn't be any surprises over the length of the ceasefire, which is something we saw in the first ceasefire in November, those surprises, expecting there to be certain hostages released, and then they never came. The Bibas family, of course, comes top of mind.
No doubt about that. Thoughts are with the families of all the hostages as we wait for confirmation about exactly what is unfolding in the coming hours and days. Correspondent Zach Anders, live from southern Israel. Thank you very much for your coverage, as always. And now for more reaction to that exact point, we welcome Daniel Shek, Director of Diplomacy at the Hostage and Missing Families Forum and former Israeli ambassador to France. Daniel, thank you so much. We've been talking about the families of the hostages. They've been through so many conflicting reports around a deal. This dramatic Hamas announcement coming through in recent hours, Israeli officials still examining the details. So to start, your reaction to the latest developments.
So thanks, Benita. As always, when we discuss this, I start with a word of caution. We are not part of the negotiations, so I don't have reliable information about what exactly is on the table. Having said that, sometimes the best thing is to trust the gut feelings, the instincts of the people involved. And as we speak, dozens of members of the forum, both family members and volunteers, have spontaneously congregated into the headquarters. So in trying to, follow events, see if there's anything that we can do as a civil society organization. So there is a touch of excitement that I can point out, but there have been too many disappointments for me to be confident that this is actually going to happen until the deal is signed and carried out.
Daniel, as we are talking, I'm hearing from our news team that the Israeli War Cabinet has decided that the operation in Rafah will still continue. That may or may not come as a surprise to you. And there are also reports we are hearing that a team will be sent to Cairo, suggesting that this conversation will continue, as you already alluded to. One can certainly understand cautious responses from the families, waiting for more details. But give us a sense of the range of views in terms of the families of the hostages. Many believe a deal needs to be secured as soon as possible, no matter how many hostages it involves, and others say the military pressure needs to continue. Give us your sense of how the families are likely responding right now.
So you're right, Benita. This is the range, and I can't give you exact numbers, but the very strong majority belongs to the first group, people who believe that you have to get out whoever you can get out at the moment that you can get them out without delay. Although, obviously, as all of us do, they hope that a deal, even if it is step by step, even if it has more than one chapter, will englobe all the hostages in the end, even if in time it's going to take a little bit longer. But Benita, I have to say something about the War Cabinet's reaction. One has to wonder why it is urgent and important to state that the operation in Rafah is going ahead anyway. What is the point of doing so when this deal is on the table and possibly there might be a need to delay at least that operation? I don't want to accuse the War Cabinet of bad will in this negotiation, but I really don't see the point of making these statements, even if deep down you know that this is what's going to happen.
Well, we certainly are going to be watching exactly what unfolds. And as you say, a range of reactions. We will be following it all. Daniel Shek, for now, thank you so much. Always appreciate you being with us on I24 News. Thank you. And now, for more reaction, it's a pleasure to welcome to studio Dr. David Shimoni, former intelligence official at the Commanders for Israel's Security. Dr. Shimoni, thank you so much for being here. We're talking about conflicting reports. At the same time, we are getting this update from the Prime Minister's office, the War Cabinet unanimously deciding that Israel will continue with that operation in Rafah. At the same time, it says, although the Hamas proposal is far from Israel's necessary requirements, Israel will send a delegation of working-class mediators to exhaust the possibility of reaching an agreement under conditions acceptable to Israel. I'm reading that straight off the Prime Minister's office, sending that through just moments ago. Your response, your insights to exactly that.
First of all, I'm encouraged by the response of the Hamas. Again, we don't know exactly what was said, and also there's a question of language because they gave their answer in Arabic and we don't know exactly how it translates. But they were speaking about a ceasefire, which is a big change. They're not talking about a total cessation of military actions. They're talking about a ceasefire, what the Arabs would call a hudna, not the sulha, not the final agreement, but something for a short period of time or for a limited period of time. They're talking now about a ceasefire and not about the end of the war. I believe this is a great achievement of the CIA chief, who's been...
Bill Burns is here right now.
Yeah, exerting a lot of effort and pressure. I think he became less polite towards the Qataris and applied a lot of pressure on them, and they applied pressure on the Hamas. And what we hear now is a big change in against what we used to hear in the past few days. They demand a total commitment to end the war. And now they're talking that they achieved a ceasefire. I think it's a big change and a big achievement. Question now is, of course, what will the government of Israel do? The Prime Minister is under a lot of pressure from his extreme ministers, want to attack Rafah. He every day now makes these bombastic statements. We are going to conquer Rafah. We're going to destroy Rafah. I believe maybe he has no choice but doing something, but he won't initiate a big operation in Gaza. He might try to do some, instruct the army to do some limited operations in Rafah to save face, but Rafah is not prepared. There's still over 1 million refugees in the Rafah area. We haven't managed to evacuate them. Today there were talks about 10,000 of them leaving. That's nothing in comparison to the amount of refugees there. And we cannot launch a big offensive in Rafah before all of these refugees are out.
We know that going into Rafah, according to Israel, is part of its goal to eliminate the Hamas threat. At the same time, one cannot help but ask the question right now, wouldn't it make sense to stop that operation for now, secure the release of as many hostages as possible while it's at least being discussed by the stakeholders involved, and then continue with those operations after the fact?
We've been discussing it here in the studio for 6 months or 7 months almost, and my opinion always was and is that getting the hostages back is first priority, most urgent, most important mission for Israel and for the IDF. If a military operation in Rafah will serve directly the release and the safety of our hostages, then yeah, sure, let's go ahead with it. But I don't think that's the case. I think a major operation in Rafah will endanger the life of our hostages.
And when one looks at the sentiment on the streets, Daniel Shek alluded to it as well. We know that protesters have already gone to Tel Aviv, outside defense headquarters, making it very clear that they want a deal and they want that deal to happen now. Let's take a listen to one of those protesters.
We expect from the Israeli government to take this deal to save all the remaining hostages who are still alive, save lives, And again, we see that the Israeli government is doing everything to fail a deal.
And of course, we know it's 132 hostages in captivity. We know the youngest is a baby, Kfir Bibas. We don't know if the Kfir Bibas and his brother Ariel and Mom Shiri are still alive, but we don't know any of the hostages, which ones are alive, because of course Hamas has yet to give that proof of life, has yet to give that list. But one can sense that people just want to get as many people as possible back home and do it immediately.
And yes, you can sabotage any negotiations on technical aspects. And now if the demand is, or we say we will not go forward with the deal before we get a precise list of the people who will be released, I think that's a way to sabotage the negotiations and the deal. Because as you mentioned, and as Ambassador Shek said, any hostage that comes home safely as soon as possible is a blessing. We don't have to worry about the list. We have to worry about the people. We have to see the buses, the vehicles coming and unloading our people, and not checking them against any list and saying, oh, they bluffed. They will bluff. But any hostages that comes home now is a blessing, and we should pursue that.
And as we are speaking, Dr. Shimoni, we're hearing news just in, the IDF saying it is conducting targeted strikes in Rafah right now. That's in southern Gaza. That news just in. Dr. Shimoni, stay with us. There's more to discuss. We're going to turn now, though, to Washington. The U.S. State Department's Matthew Miller says they are also examining terms of the ceasefire deal. Let's take a listen in his own words. Well, more than that, we're going to rather analyze exactly that. Let's go to I-24 News contributor Albert Lewitton. He joins us now from Miami. Good to see you on a very big news day, Albert. Dramatic developments. Hamas saying it's agreeing to this deal. Israeli officials looking into the details. CIA head Bill Burns is here, and we wait for word on the hostages. And of course, amongst the hostages are American citizens too. And we just know that there are so many people across the globe waiting to hear good news that they should all get to come home. Talk us through the response out of the United States to this latest breaking news.
Sure, Benita, good to see you. Just to let you know, within the past few minutes, and you alluded to it moments ago with Matt Miller, the State Department spokesman, and he was saying that the State Department is monitoring it. They are looking at, they're reviewing at Hamas's response. And just a moment ago, I was monitoring the White House Rear Admiral John Kirby, the White House spokesman, basically saying that the White House itself is also reviewing the response. And something that was very important from Rear Admiral Kirby, he basically was very sure to say that he didn't want to say anything from the podium that would make it that would jeopardize any of this negotiation that any sort of deal that may have gone through. In fact, one thing that he did make mention of, and I'm going to quote him now, where he said, "This is the most sensitive moment right now." That's a quote coming from Rear Admiral John Kirby just minutes ago. Now, the news that you broke moments ago that the IDF is conducting limited action in Rafah, that has not made it yet into the White House briefing room. We suspect that will happen shortly. You should know that the President of the United States had a lunch with King Abdullah II of Jordan. It just wrapped up about 20 minutes ago. We'll get a readout as to what happened at that lunch. Now, something you should know, and we mentioned all throughout the day here on I-24 News, is that the president had a phone call with Prime Minister Netanyahu. The phone call lasted 30 minutes. What Rear Admiral John Kirby said on that phone call was that the president made very clear that the United States was not at all supportive of a ground operation in Rafah. And he made that point. The president made that point to the prime minister on that call that happened earlier today. Now, this was before the announcement was made that Hamas had agreed to some sort of a framework. And again, we don't know the details. The White House and the State Department have been very, very clear that they do not make mention as to what the agreement says, what parts of the agreement. They've been asked repeatedly. I saw maybe at least 30 reporters going through and asking constantly about what was in this agreement, what was it agreed to. Something that Ambassador Shimoni mentioned moments ago is that it was in Arabic. And so what was the agreement they agreed to? That's still something that the White House and the State Department will not divulge because they're afraid that it's such a sensitive moment that anything they say could jeopardize that.
A sensitive moment indeed. And very briefly, Albert, we've seen disturbing protests on student campuses in the United States. But more broadly speaking, what is your sense of the public sentiment in the US right now, the impact of the Biden administration's stance on the war so far, including at this juncture?
Well, there hasn't been really any any polling done on that moment. Just moments ago, ABC News and Ipsos released a poll that shows, and remember, we are in an election year between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, and Joe Biden is leading Donald Trump 46-44. Some are saying it's because of the Biden response to what's happening in Israel. There's an article that just recently came out that had to do with the Jewish vote, which, you know, if you remember recently, there was a lot of news made about the president going to Michigan, trying to help the Muslim vote to make sure that there wasn't going to be a issue in the primaries. Well, now it looks like 4 states are now up in contention: Pennsylvania, Georgia, Nevada, and Arizona. Those are 4 big states in the election, many of whom have Jewish voters. So the issue of what's happening in Israel could, again, make a difference as to what happens in election November, and could make a difference as to what's happening right now. You should know that the protests have not stopped. The University of California, San Diego is encountering right now, as we speak, live pictures were coming in from San Diego of arrests being made at UC San Diego. So those protests have not stopped. In fact, Columbia University just this morning said that the graduation ceremony has been canceled, and they'll take it down to just schools being graduated one by one all through the next couple of weeks. Benita.
We'll be watching, and you'll be helping us unpack all the latest developments across the United States. As always, Albert Lewiton, thank you for your updates live from Miami. Thanks, Albert. And Dr. Shimoni, I want to pick up on that breaking news that came through just a short while ago, the IDF confirming strikes inside Rafah targeting Hamas terrorists. It perhaps answers the question I posed to you earlier on: why would that operation continue if there was some kind of attempt at a breakthrough deal? Your insights right now.
Again, we don't have the exact information, but yeah, when you asked me the question, I answered that most likely, if we do something in Rafah, it will be a limited scale operation. It won't be the big invasion that we're been threatening the Rafah residents and the Hamas. So maybe there's some special units operating. Maybe they're taking better observation points around Rafah. We haven't heard of an incursion into the city of Rafah. It might be in the areas surrounding the city, maybe some refugee camp, maybe some military installation by of the Hamas. So in a way, it might serve to save face for the Israeli cabinet. Oh yes, we are operating in Rafah, and we are fulfilling our promise that we will enter Rafah. But I don't think they'll actually enter into the city and siege the city and try to conquer the city. Not now.
A developing situation. We watch it all unfold. Dr. David Shimoni, thank you so much for your insights. While we're talking to you, live images on the screen there from Tel Aviv, protesters calling for a deal to be secured and for it to happen right now. Dr. Shimoni, thank you as always.